My wife packed her things to go meet her so-called dream man. When I confronted her, she just smirked and told me to deal with it. So I did. And later she discovered he wasn't even real. Now everything in her life is unraveling. My name is John. I am 38 and I work as a project manager for a mid-sized construction firm in San Francisco. My days are structured around deadlines, site inspections, and managing crews that do not tolerate confusion. I value order, predictability, and clear communication. My wife is Linda. She is 35 and works in digital marketing for a tech startup downtown. We have been married for 6 years and together for 9. We rent a 2-bedroom apartment in Soma. No kids. We split expenses evenly and keep mostly separate social circles, aside from a few mutual friends we see occasionally. Until recently, I would have described our marriage as functional but tense. Not explosive, just consistently tight around the edges. Linda has always considered herself blunt. In practice, that usually means she says whatever she is thinking with very little filter. Early in our relationship, I mistook that for confidence. Over time, it started feeling more like contempt. Still, we managed. I am not passive, but I also do not escalate unless there is a reason. About 4 months ago, she began talking about feeling bored. Not unhappy, according to her. Just bored with the city, bored with routine, bored with me being satisfied with steady work instead of chasing bigger titles or launching my own company. She said San Francisco rewards risk takers and that I was too comfortable. I asked what she wanted to change. She never gave specifics, just vague comments about deserving more. Then one night she told me she had met someone online. She described him as her dream man. Successful founder. Living overseas. Visionary. According to her, he understood her ambition in a way I never had. I asked if she was serious. She smirked and told me to deal with it. I stayed calm. I told her clearly that if she intended to pursue anything romantic with someone else, we needed to discuss separation like adults. She rolled her eyes and said I was overreacting and insecure. 2 weeks later, I came home from work and found 2 large suitcases open on the bed. She was methodically folding clothes. Her passport was sitting on the dresser next to her laptop. I asked where she was going. She said she was flying out to meet him. She said it casually, like she was announcing a business trip. That was the moment I realized she actually believed she was stepping into a better life. And when I confronted her about leaving her husband for a man she had never met in person, she just smiled and said I would understand eventually. I did understand, just not in the way she expected. I did not try to physically stop her. I did not hide her passport or cancel the ticket. I asked direct questions, and then I let her make her choice. When I saw the suitcases on the bed, I asked where exactly she was flying and for how long. Linda said Barcelona. She said he had booked her a one-way ticket. She said she would stay in a hotel for the first week and then move into his apartment. She described it like a career opportunity mixed with a romance. I asked if she had ever met him in person. She said no, but that they had hours of video calls. She said he had already introduced her to a few of his business contacts online. She said I was threatened because he was ambitious and international. I told her calmly that if she boarded that plane, our marriage would be over. Not a pause. Not a trial separation. Over. I explained that I would speak to a lawyer and start the formal process immediately. I would not fund her transition or wait for her to test drive another life and return if it disappointed her. She smiled in that tight way she does when she thinks she is winning. She said I was too risk-averse to actually follow through. She said I would cool down once I saw how happy she was. I did not argue after that. Instead, I reviewed our lease. Both our names were on it, but the term was up in 4 months. Our bank accounts were mostly separate except for a shared expenses account. I transferred my portion for the upcoming bills and documented everything. Not as revenge, as preparation. The night before her flight, she packed calmly. No tears. No hesitation. She played music while folding clothes. At one point, she asked me if I was going to miss her. I told her that I would miss the version of her that respected commitments. The morning of her departure, I drove her to SFO. The ride was quiet. She scrolled through messages from him, smiling at her phone. At the curb, she hugged me briefly and said I would understand once I stopped thinking small. Then she walked into the terminal without looking back. I drove home alone and did not call her. What she did not know was that I had already started looking into the man she believed she was flying across the ocean to build a life with. And the more I looked, the less he existed. The moment I dropped her off at SFO and watched her walk into the terminal, I made a decision that probably sounds cold. I blocked her number before I even reached the freeway. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. I had told her that boarding that plane meant the marriage was over. I do not make statements like that for effect. If I left communication open, it would blur a boundary I had already set. By the time she was somewhere over the Atlantic, there was no direct line between us. When I got home, the apartment felt different. Not devastated, just stripped down. I walked through each room once, taking mental inventory. Most of the furniture was jointly purchased. Nothing irreplaceable. The lease had 4 months remaining. I could carry it alone if necessary. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and started looking into Adrian. His name, according to Linda, was Adrian Keller. Late 30s. Tech founder. Recently exited his company and now investing in European startups. Based in Barcelona. For someone who had supposedly built and sold a company, he had almost no verifiable footprint. The company he claimed to have founded did exist, but the registered founder listed in public records had a completely different name, different academic background, different career timeline. I checked multiple sources to make sure I was not confusing holding companies or subsidiaries. Adrian's LinkedIn profile looked polished but thin, fewer than 100 connections, very little engagement. Employment history that only stretched back a few years despite claims of a long career. The profile photo looked professionally shot, but generic. A reverse image search returned a stock photography portfolio featuring a model who looked nearly identical. That was not a minor inconsistency. At that point, this stopped being about betrayal and started looking like something else entirely. I took screenshots, archived pages, not because I intended to confront anyone immediately, but because documentation matters. Dates matter. Claims matter. If Linda had just flown across the ocean to meet a fantasy, the consequences were going to be real. And I had a strong feeling reality was about to reach her faster than she expected. I expected some kind of reaction within the first 24 hours. Not from her reaching out to me, since I had closed that door. I expected something indirect. An email. A call from an unknown number. A message through one of our mutual friends asking why I had suddenly gone silent. Nothing came. What had happened was quieter. The next morning, I received an automated notification from our shared expenses account. A transfer had been made from Linda's personal account into it. Larger than usual. Almost 3 times her typical monthly contribution. That caught my attention. I logged in and reviewed the transaction history. The deposit timestamp matched the approximate time she would have landed in Barcelona. That suggested she still had access to her banking and had not been immediately compromised. But the amount did not make sense if she was planning to move permanently. Why overfund a joint account tied to an apartment she had just abandoned? I did not speculate. I kept tracking. Later that afternoon, I checked the public Instagram account she maintained for networking. She had posted a photo of Barcelona's skyline taken from what looked like a hotel balcony. The caption talked about bold choices and stepping into destiny. The comments were predictable. You deserve this. So proud of you. Chase your dreams. No sign of Adrian in the photo. No tagged location beyond the city. I zoomed in on the reflection in the glass door behind her. No second figure. No obvious signs of someone else in the room. That by itself meant nothing, but it reinforced the pattern. That evening, another transaction alert appeared. A sizable international wire transfer from her personal account to a bank based in Spain. That was new. I could not see the exact recipient, only the routing destination. But the timing was precise. Less than 6 hours after her arrival. At that point, the structure of this so-called dream life began to look less romantic and more transactional. If he was wealthy and had booked everything, why was she wiring money within hours of landing? I did not panic. I did not intervene. I documented the amounts and dates. Because if this was what I thought it was, the unraveling had already started. And it was not going to be subtle. The second wire transfer happened the next morning. Different amount. Same destination country. At that point, I stopped framing this as a romantic mistake and started framing it as exposure. I pulled up the screenshots I had taken of Adrian's profile and read through his messaging patterns again. There was a consistent theme in the fragments Linda had shown me before she left. Investment opportunity. Short-term liquidity issue. Temporary account restriction due to a pending acquisition. At the time, she had framed it as insider access. She said he trusted her enough to involve her in financial logistics. I remember asking why a man who had just sold a company would need help covering transaction timing gaps. She told me I did not understand how international finance worked. I understand cash flow. I manage multi-million-dollar projects. If someone has truly exited a company, Liquidity is not solved by wiring funds from a woman he has never met in person. That afternoon, something shifted publicly. Linda's Instagram stories disappeared. Not deleted, archived, or hidden. Her LinkedIn profile, which she had updated obsessively in the weeks leading up to her departure, went quiet. No more inspirational posts. No more comments about bold transitions. Around 8 p.m. Pacific time, which would have been early morning in Barcelona, I received an email from her personal account. The subject line read, "Can you call me?" The body of the email was one sentence. "My phone says your number is unavailable." I did not respond immediately. Instead, I checked the shared bank account again. A third transfer, larger than the first two combined. That was the moment the structure fully revealed itself. Whatever she had flown toward was not a charismatic founder waiting with open arms. It was a mechanism, one that extracted money quickly and efficiently before the target stabilized. The smirk she gave me at the curb replayed in my mind. Not with anger, with clarity. She had believed she was upgrading her life. Now she was funding the illusion. I waited another hour before replying to her email. Short, direct. "What happened?" She replied within 3 minutes. The tone was different. No confidence. No superiority. Just urgency. She said Adrian had not shown up at the airport. He had texted her saying there was a last-minute issue with a regulatory meeting. He told her to take a taxi to the hotel and that he would join her there later that evening. He never did. According to her email, he had called once from a number with a Spanish country code. He sounded rushed. He told her there had been a temporary freeze on one of his business accounts due to compliance reviews tied to a pending acquisition. He said he needed her help bridging a transfer so a deal would not collapse. She wired money. He said it was temporary. He said he would reimburse her in full once the freeze lifted. He said this was proof that she was different from other women, that she was a partner. By the time she wrote to me, she had not heard from him in 9 hours. His WhatsApp showed one gray check mark. His LinkedIn profile had disappeared. The company website she had shown me weeks earlier now redirected to a blank page. She said she tried calling the hotel front desk to ask if anyone named Adrian had checked in or left a message. They told her no one by that name was registered. She ended the email with, "I think something is wrong." I read it twice. Then I checked the timing of the transfers again. 3 wires in less than 36 hours. Each escalating in size. Classic escalation pattern. Build urgency. Create pressure. Reward compliance with praise. Then disappear. I responded with one question. "How much?" Her reply took longer this time. When it came, it was a number that made my chest tighten, not from heartbreak, but from sheer scale. It was almost her entire savings. She said she thought it was temporary. She said she did not want to tell me before because I would not understand. She was right about one thing. I did understand, just not in the way she meant. The number she sent was $182,000. That was not shared money. It was her personal savings. Stock bonuses. Performance incentives. Money she had talked about using to eventually start her own consultancy. Gone in less than 2 days. Her next email was longer. She said Adrian had stopped responding entirely. His WhatsApp account was no longer active. The LinkedIn profile had vanished. The company site redirected to nothing. She wrote that she had gone to a police station in Barcelona and filed a report. She wrote that she was trying to contact her bank to reverse the wires. Then she added that she needed help figuring out what to do next. I read that sentence twice. For days earlier, she had told me to deal with it. She had smirked when I said the marriage would be over if she boarded that plane. She had framed me as small-minded for questioning a man she had never met. Now she was alone in a hotel room, financially gutted, and suddenly looking for structure. I did not respond immediately. Instead, I thought about what my involvement would mean. If I stepped in to guide her through fraud recovery, I would be re-entering a dynamic where I stabilized chaos she willingly created. I had already drawn a line at the airport. An hour later, another email came through. "I know I messed up. Please just talk to me." There it was. Not remorse for leaving. Not acknowledgement of disrespect. Just panic over consequences. That clarified everything. I did not draft a long reply. I did not offer instructions. I did not provide comfort. I blocked her email address. Then I blocked her on every remaining platform she could reach me through. It was not impulsive. It was consistent. She chose to end the marriage when she boarded that plane. The fraud did not reverse that decision. It only exposed the quality of the choice. For the first time since she left, the situation felt clean. Not satisfying. Just final. The next morning I called a divorce attorney. Not because I was emotional. Because timelines matter. In California, there is a mandatory waiting period once papers are filed. The sooner the clock starts, the sooner the process concludes. I explained the situation in neutral terms. Spouse left the country to pursue another relationship. Significant independent financial loss incurred abroad. Communication severed. The attorney did not sound surprised. He asked whether there were shared assets beyond basic household property. I told him no shared investments beyond the apartment lease and a modest joint checking account. He advised filing immediately and documenting the date she physically left the marital residence. Fortunately, I had the flight confirmation screenshots and the timestamp from the day I dropped her off at San Francisco Airport. That afternoon, I formally retained him. 2 days later, I received a voicemail from an unknown international number. I did not answer. A follow-up text came through before I could block it. It was Linda. She wrote that her bank had frozen the remainder of her account pending investigation. She wrote that the hotel stay had been extended on her credit card, but she did not know how long she could cover it. She wrote that she was trying to change her flight, but ticket prices had spiked. There was no reflection about what led her there. Just logistical updates. I forwarded the voicemail and text to my attorney and asked about next steps. He recommended serving divorce papers as soon as she returned to the United States. He also advised that her personal financial losses were legally separate, since the transfers came from her individual account after she had effectively left the marital home. That mattered. That evening, I transferred my portion of the final month's shared expenses into the joint account and initiated paperwork to close it at the end of the billing cycle. Clean separation. 3 days later, I received confirmation through a flight alert service that she had rebooked a return ticket. She had gone to Barcelona to meet her dream man. She was coming back alone, financially depleted, and without the certainty she had carried through airport security. The unraveling was no longer theoretical. It was scheduled to land. She landed on a Thursday evening. I did not go to the airport. Around 9 p.m., there was a knock at the apartment door. I already knew it was her. The building's entry system had logged her access code attempt. Her name was still on the lease, so legally she could enter. I opened the door, stepped aside, and let her roll the suitcases in. I did not ask how the flight was. I did not ask what happened. I did not invite a conversation. The apartment looked different from when she left. I had rearranged the living room, taken down her framed prints, packed her office equipment and personal decor into labeled boxes stacked neatly near the second bedroom. Not out of spite, out of transition. She stood there for a moment like she was waiting for something from me. An opening, a question, a reaction. I gave her none. I told her the guest room was clear and that her belongings were organized inside. I told her the shared checking account would be closed at the end of the billing cycle. I told her that divorce papers were in progress and she would be formally served soon. All of it delivered evenly. She tried to start explaining. I raised my hand slightly and said I was not interested in a post-mortem. The sequence of events was already clear. She said she needed to figure out next steps. I told her that was her responsibility. There was no hostility in my tone, just detachment. She asked if we could at least discuss what this meant for us. I told her there was no us to analyze. She ended the marriage when she boarded the plane. The fraud did not change that. It only clarified the outcome. Silence settled in the hallway. For months, she had spoken with certainty about deserving more, about outgrowing stability. Now she looked like someone who had miscalculated and expected the system to reset. It does not reset. I went into the primary bedroom and closed the door. From that point forward, we operated like two tenants finishing a lease. No shared meals. No shared conversations. No debriefs about Barcelona. The dream she chased dissolved. And I had already moved on from needing to hear the details. The next few weeks were procedural. She stayed in the second bedroom. I stayed in the primary. We coordinated bathroom schedules like co-workers on different shifts. Communication was limited to logistics about utilities and the lease end date. I did not ask about the investigation into her money. I did not track whether the bank recovered anything. That chapter was separate from mine. She spent most evenings on her laptop, probably dealing with fraud departments and insurance claims. Occasionally, I would hear her on the phone speaking in a controlled, subdued tone, very different from the confidence she carried before Barcelona. Divorce papers were served 2 weeks after her return. She did not contest them. There was no dramatic confrontation, no last-minute revelation, no plea for reconciliation that forced me into some emotional crossroads. The crossroads had happened at the airport. Once the lease expired, I moved into a smaller apartment closer to my office. Cleaner commute. Lower rent. Fewer reminders. She moved in with a friend across the city. I learned that indirectly through a change of address notification related to a final utility bill. As for the money, I eventually heard through a mutual acquaintance that only a fraction was recovered. Most of it had been transferred through multiple international accounts within hours of her wiring it. That is how these operations work. Urgency, exclusivity, emotional leverage. What stands out to me is not the fraud itself. It is how easily she dismissed verifiable reality in favor of a curated fantasy. Public records existed. Inconsistencies were obvious. But the story he told aligned with how she wanted to see herself. Ambitious, chosen, elevated. I did not lose money. I did not lose stability. What I lost was the illusion that we were building something grounded. When she told me to deal with it, I did. I dealt with it by stepping aside. Sometimes the cleanest response to disrespect is not retaliation or argument. It is quiet exit. She chased a dream that was not real. In the process, she proved something very real about our marriage.